It's interesting, actually, the speed at which we see people want stuff delivered isn't necessarily where it was like 2 or 3 years ago. We've seen all of these startups come and go that were trying to create, grocery, quick commerce, etc., promising like 10-minute deliveries. And obviously with things like the Swiggy IPO, there is a real market some places for like 10-minute delivery, but in other places where maybe there's a slightly higher cost of labor, I don't think that's really practical.
Paul, thank you so much for giving up your day and coming into our glorious studio. Obviously, I've known you for a while, but for the folks who don't know you, could you just tell us about who you are, who you work for, what actually led you to here as well? I'd love to, take that from you as well.
Yeah, okay, a bit of an introduction to me then. So my name is Paul Wilkinson. I'm a Director of Product at Deliveroo, where I look after some of the partner tech, especially for our grocery and retail partners. Now, grocery and retail is really what I've built my career out of, and innovation in grocery in particular. I spent 10 years at Tesco. Most of that was in the labs team, building that up from just a few people to what it became. And then I spent a couple of years at Amazon working on Alexa, also doing like grocery shopping, predominantly for the US market, but also for the UK. And I kind of bring all that experience together in Deliveroo now to help partners, but for me, a partner is a grocer or a retailer, help them do rapid delivery, so getting basically fairly small baskets to customers really quickly.
You must have seen so many different innovations and technologies and pitches from startups just from the days that I used to work with you when you were at Tesco's in the labs. I'm just curious, in terms of from what you're seeing now from an innovation perspective, what have you seen recently that's made you think, oh my God, or if you have, something that's really stood out for you?
Oh, that's a really hard question. It's really interesting. You're right. I've seen so many different ideas over the years. Everything, from people wanting to hang trolleys from the ceiling through to, things that you're more familiar with, like the just walk out the store tech. What have I seen recently that's really interesting? I think what's really interesting is now the scale at which some of the things that we've talked about for a long time are now actually happening. They're still not happening like everywhere, but one of my favorites over a long period of time has been like drone delivery, right? The consumer value that you get from a delivery in like 3 minutes and to, your back garden or your front garden or whatever, I think is fascinating. And we've gone from a world where we sort of talked about it being possible to now where if you go to the right parts of the world, and we're talking about, I think, the Gold Coast in Australia or, the right part of, America, there are now like thousands of these deliveries happening every day. Even in Ireland, right, in Dublin, we've got Manna, who's a little startup there doing some really cool stuff. And it's getting to that point now where like people have proven that it can work at scale. What hasn't really happened yet is the regulatory reform to allow it to happen everywhere it would be suitable. Like it's never going to work in places like the Shard, right, where we are now. But in suburbia where people have gardens, which is a huge amount of the developed world, then that definitely is, I think that's really exciting that we're getting to the point now where it definitely works. The customer proposition is amazing. You go and see these things fly, like they genuinely work. And we actually, you can see that being a big part of the future.
Now, it's gone completely out of my mind. Quick commerce. I'm just curious because Deliveroo are obviously the expert in getting things to people quickly. Have you seen anything from like your consumer, what customers actually want, right? So drone delivery, maybe, if it's still being delivered by drone, because there's this whole carbon energy conversation about using different forms of energy to get things to people. But I'm just curious from your perspective, from a customer perspective, what are you seeing that customers want?
What do customers want delivered really quickly, I guess, is the question.
Yeah.
It's interesting, actually, the speed at which we see people want stuff delivered isn't necessarily where it was like 2 or 3 years ago. We've seen all of these startups come and go that were trying to create, grocery, quick commerce, etc., promising like 10-minute deliveries. And in places like India, obviously with things like the Swiggy IPO, there is a real market, some places for like 10-minute delivery, but in other places where maybe there's a slightly higher, cost of labor, I don't think that's really practical. So, quick, the word quick is even, it's a bit of a blur, right? It's like, how fast do people think? Like, we tend to find that people, groceries, like half an hour is a pretty quick delivery still, and people are really keen for that. And for like non-food items, it maybe gets into more like maybe 45 minutes, an hour is perfectly acceptable and still very quick compared to like next day.
Yeah.
But what do people want? I mean, people just want groceries is the first thing people want, right? Food, especially, imagine you've got little kids in the house, you don't want to leave, you need some more food, like that sort of stuff. We get a lot of distress purchases, you get a lot of people getting, snacks, or they might have run out of wine at a dinner party, that sort of thing. But more and more now we're getting, larger baskets, people just doing general top-up shops, people just buying like dinner or the stuff they need for lunch and breakfast tomorrow or that sort of thing. So basket sizes, are constantly getting a little bit bigger, and we're seeing the range of partners on the platform that support that too, like some of the larger supermarkets now are on when, it started in convenience stores.
When you think about how it's what you said, it's the shopping mission that drives the delivery. I think if I replayed back what you're saying, it's not necessarily customers are saying, I want it in 15 minutes, I need it in 5. It's that mission that you want. So if it's a distress purchase and you need something for your baby at 3 o'clock at night, yeah, okay, maybe you want it there in 15, but 30 minutes will be good enough. So I guess it's not about getting there faster, I guess is the question that I'm thinking. Customers are not screaming at Deliveroo, we want it there in 5 minutes.
No, that's completely right. Like, getting it in half an hour is more than fast enough for most people in most situations. Yeah, there's not many cases where if you've run out of milk, you need it like immediately. Otherwise, it's the end of the world, is there? Like, you get a cold too. Yeah, well, exactly. You probably wait, you can wait another 10 minutes for that cup of tea, can't you?
Yeah, or just boil the kettle again.
Well, in terms of AI, what's your perspective on AI and how, I guess in 2 parts, forgetting Deliveroo for a second, how do you think AI can help grocers? Because you must have seen the struggles that grocers have with making sense of shelf edge data. So where do you see AI in grocery?
I mean, I guess AI in grocery, depending on what you mean by the phrase AI, is without getting tied down in discussion about the definition. I think really it's about like, how do you automate decisions in a business? And if you look at the grocers, especially in the UK where they're very developed, very competitive, they're already using systems to make a lot of decisions, whether that's on like store ordering, just making sure products get on the shelf. So I think all of that will get better, will improve, companies will apply newer and newer techniques to make that better and richer. The amount of effort that a lot of the retailers already put into things like knowing when the school holidays are, because that impacts how much stuff people buy and that impacts the availability on the shelf. And this kind of just goes back to like in retail, there's a bunch of like original problems which are never fully solved, but we're always looking to get better and better at. Things like on-shelf availability, people don't like to queue. People don't like it when stuff blocks the aisles in the store. They're very grocery ones, right? But those are definitely a world of like basic problems which have never really gone away.
Yeah.
And you can apply AI to get a better result for customers for those. And I think that's what it's all about at the end of the day. We're trying to drive availability for customers, trying to make sure they can get what they want. And, AI will have a large part to play in that. And it already does, right? Like if you look at, most retailers in the UK already use very systems-driven ordering systems. Some of them are a bit later to the game than others. Some have only adopted it in the last sort of 5 or 6 years. For some, it's been there since like the 80s and, it used to be mainframe-driven, right? You know what I'm talking about. So I think that is, a huge part of grocery retail, especially in the more mature competitive markets.
Yeah. In terms of when you look at future in-store integrations and technology, I assume Deliveroo integrates seamlessly into the order management systems for retailers. What do you see the future of this? I mean, are we going to look at, Deliveroo checkouts within stores? Well, yeah, I just see technology integration in the future.
Interesting. So like the integration with retail partners is one of my teams, right? So this is an area very close to my heart. And yeah, it's a good question. So there's a broad spectrum today, and we're not going to name any names, right? But there are partners already who send us almost real-time stock information to the delivery system, so that when you're on the app and you order a product, you're going to get it, right? Obviously, that information is not always 100% accurate, and really with grocers, it's impossible, right? Even the best ones in the world are never 100% accurate on their stock.
Sorry to interrupt you. Is there an industry average for that? Like, in terms of accuracy of stock, is there an industry average? Like, is it in the 98, 99?
It's nowhere near the 98s or 99s. That's what it is. Yeah. Most good retailers most good grocers can get to, well above 90%. But it still varies massively between them, and some are better than others at keeping the stock on the shelf. And that is all down to their implementation of their systems, how good the supply chains are, how mature that is. And that's very much a UK-based view of the world as well.
Yeah.
Certainly my experience when you go a bit more further afield, like we've got partners in the Middle East, partners in the Far East, in the different markets that we're in. And it's not, the world isn't homogenous. I also know from working with a lot of like US retailers or speaking to a lot of US retailers over the years, not in my current role, that actually some of them, just because of the nature of the market they're in, aren't quite as advanced at that. So I would say like 90% is a pretty good number to aim for.
I got you. In terms of, obviously, from when Deliveroo was launched to now, the market has exploded with competitors all trying to mirror, copy what you guys have successfully done. What's the secret there that you're constantly pushing the boundaries of delivery and you're innovating in this area? Is there a secret sauce to that?
It's a great question. I think it really is about the culture. And like, if you look at Will, who's the founder of Deliveroo, he's still the CEO, so we still very much feel like a founder-led business, even though there's now thousands of people in head office, right? And he is all about like the get up and go, like how do you own this problem? How do you innovate? How do you drive this? Because like fundamentally, we are not the biggest players in this market, right? There are a couple of other companies out there, especially like in the markets that we're in, that are huge. And the best way to compete with them is to innovate. And that's exciting, right? But there are a whole bunch of things that Deliveroo has done first that really have like set the standard there as well. Even, I guess, the concept of delivering food from restaurants in the first place. I think we're now 12 and a half years old as a business. Like, Deliveroo was one of the very first ones to do that. And I think that mindset has stayed with us. In fact, one of the really great stats I heard recently that Will was really proud of is that at least, I think something like 60 people from Deliveroo have gone on to found their own businesses. Do you think is like Will's super proud of that, and quite rightly too. That just shows how like innovative and how sort of self-starter and pushing the boundaries we want to be as a business. I think that's exciting.
What do you think if you were going to become, like chief delivery officer for a major grocery, what would be the things that they need to do to be better at it?
So I think if I think about the future of grocery, right? If you want to do a large shop and you've got, a big basket and what you really need is the efficiency to like fulfill that order, then you need to be sending a van on a milk round, that sort of thing. Like Deliveroo is not set up to bring you like baskets and baskets of stuff or a whole trolley load of shopping, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, those vans are not set up to bring you one green tray. If you do the minimum order quantity on one of the online platforms, they are almost certainly losing money when they send it to you. So I think the future really is like a mix of these different things, right? It's a mix of how do you use your own platform where that makes the most sense, and how do you sort of use somebody else's platform where that makes sense too.
If you were going to create, imagine I'm a new customer and I'm coming to you, what are the 3 things that I would need to have in place or should be focused on to make sure I can maximize my delivery for customers?
So if you really wanted to join the platform today and you wanted it to be a successful and straight away, then you really need to have, good product information, right? I mean, that's the cornerstone of any online selling business, good pictures, good metadata. The second thing you really need is an integration into your system, right? And I would say that because I look after the integration team, right? But if you don't have that integration into your own like point of sale and financial systems, then there's a lot of efforts that you have to put in manually. It's much easier if you can integrate that. And then the third thing is back to this inventory, right? If you don't know where your stock is, then I really struggle as to how you run your retail business today, especially for grocery, right? I know we can talk a little bit differently when it comes to general merchandise, but for grocery, you need to know where your stock is. And if you know those 3 things, if you've got that capabilities, then getting on Deliveroo quite easily, especially if you want to sell tons of stuff. But you can do it quite manually as well, right? Like we've got tons of small and medium-sized businesses now that just do it, they just have it manually. They put the items through the till separately. That doesn't really work if you're like a Morrison's or a Waitrose or a Sainsbury's.
Yeah.
But if you're, Ali's grocery shop, you can probably do that, right?
Yeah. There's probably a few Ali's grocery shops out there. Anyway, in terms of...
It's quite a lot of Paul's bakeries, nothing to do with that.
In terms of again, Deliveroo has been really, really successful within customer experience in terms of creating that seamless customer experience. But you've also been incredibly good at doing that across territories, right? Across different. Again, what's the secret there? What are you doing that's allowing you to sort of drive that seamless customer experience? How do you achieve consistency on that scale?
I mean, I think a lot of the stuff about their customer experience is just focusing on the customer, right? Making sure you're solving problems for the customer, listening to your customers, right? Not forgetting that really that's the whole reason. And if you wouldn't have a business if it wasn't for the customer. So many businesses like fall down on this, right? They become, a financial accounting business or a property business without really focusing on the customer. It's certainly something I learned a lot about at Amazon as well. You always have to have the empty chair in the meeting room. Yeah. That's where the customer sits, right? You've got to really think from the customer point of view. And like, if you're launching something, you think, actually, if I was a customer, would I really use this? Is it or not? Is it a bit rubbish? Then don't ship that, right? And just it's about having that self-discipline to say, well, look, is what we're building here, is it actually, useful and usable? Is it going to get used? And got to make sure you keep your bar really high. Make sure you're always innovating for the customer on their behalf. And then, I think that will follow.
Deliveroo has a pedigree in food. What's the future? Are you looking at different categories? I think you already have some relationships with traditional retailers, but yeah, tell me a little bit about where you see the future of the categories that Deliveroo will be serving.
Up until recently, we were very much a food business, a restaurant business. I guess that's how Deliveroo started, right? With Will delivering stuff himself from restaurants in the Covent Garden area because he saw a gap in the market. I think it was 2018 that we started with Co-op on the grocery journey, right? So it's quite a while ago now.
Yeah.
But obviously that really accelerated during the pandemic. And then about a year ago, we started bringing some non-grocery retail brands onto the platform as well. And they continue to launch. So now we've got, like Screwfix, B&Q, Wilco, even Ann Summers, actually, you can buy products now. And the perfume shop, so on and so on, right? But the number of things that we sell is like, it's almost crazy in some ways, right? The number of people are buying like silicone sealant on Deliveroo in numbers that you would be surprised by, right?
I think like Zia Weiss, it's like,
yeah, it's like them for doing, it's tradies, it's people doing DIY themselves and stuff as well. So like the number of things that we sell now is, it's unusual for things like that. Also think like candles, right? People like buying a bottle of champagne and a candle from the supermarket and sending that as a gift, right? Yeah. Like, because we've got good coverage and we can send, if you've forgotten to send someone a gift, you can now deliver them a bottle of champagne and a candle from the supermarket, right? And that's better than nothing, yeah? It's quite a good gift, really.
Yeah.
And also, broadening out the categories is really interesting and something that we continue to do. What's really interesting as well is in some of the different markets that we're in, it's at a different sort of place. So actually, in Dubai now, probably the leading market in the Middle East for this, you can order almost anything in the Deliveroo app, right? We've got like Lego and Toys R Us, and like you can buy phones, you can buy, you name it pretty much. So our company mission now is like we bring the high street to you, or I've broken that there, but we bring everything in your high street to you. And if you go into Dubai Mall now, actually, and it's not just Deliveroo riders there, obviously, because there is competition, but I remember being there one morning a couple of months ago, and I took a picture because all I could see in the mall was riders and like drivers and not real customers. It was in the morning before it got really busy, but there was actually a significant number of people in there doing those deliveries. And there is like so much is available on those platforms in that market now that I think that is like a glimpse of where everything else is going.
Final question. When you look at Paul's looking glass into the future, what are the 3 things that you think are going to disrupt this, let's say, sector in general, unless you want to specifically answer it for grocery, but within the retail sector, what are the 3 things that you think are going to cause the biggest disruptions?
So I think the first one is the move to online generally, and I'll talk about some of the implications I think that has in the longer term future. Second is the availability of data and how that's just increasing and how new mechanisms for getting that. And then third, and I almost said this right at the beginning about what have I seen recently that excited me, is I'm going to go with self-driving cars, right? Because on a trip to San Francisco recently, unbelievable, yeah? And I say that as a person who has seen these things develop over the years and has been in them and so on, but it just really feels like it's turned the corner now. So let's go back to the start of that one then. And the first one is, the shift to online, right? I can't see a world in the long-term future where anyone goes into a store and buys toilet roll. It just feels a bit like, why would you do that? Like, it's, there are other categories where that applies to too, where people don't really browse. They buy what's on offer, right? So there's a whole bunch of categories like that where no one really cares about what they're buying. And I'm sure that upsets loads of brand people and so on, but they just want something that's functional. and they definitely don't need to look at it on a shelf.
Yeah.
Right. So I think there's a world where all of that stuff goes online, and most of it eventually gets automated as well, right? So these things they're coming to your house at a convenient time through some convenient mechanism. I think that's inevitable. I think that means that actually the convenience stores then shift a bit more towards fresh. Now, that's a tricky balance because all the fresh stuff is more expensive, has higher waste, is a bit harder to manage, but potentially gets you back towards, the whole bakery, butcher, greengrocer sort of idea, because all the other stuff will be online and automated. So that's my, picture of the future of stores, I think. A bit controversial, probably will take a long time for that to happen. But if you look at a lot of the growth, certainly if you look at it over a longer time scale, like the last sort of 10 or 15 years, all the growth has been in convenience and online.
Yeah.
And you can see that continuing, I think. Yes, in the last couple of years, superstores have had a really great time again and so on. There's been growth there too. But that, for me, is the longer-term view.
So that means the formats are going to change. But anyway, as you said, there's going to be a whole nother...
Then you get into like dark stores and how does that fit in? And, there's not that many dark stores around the place. No, we've got some small ones. Some of the bigger grocers have got some big ones. But yeah, it does shift to how the whole model might work. But I think that, for me, that's an inevitable long-term direction. It's not going to mean, though, that all these big stores shut down, because this is the sort of thing that will take place over like a generation.
Yeah.
Or probably more than a generation, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's fascinating. The second one was the availability of data, right? Like comes from a few different angles, right? And we've seen a lot of things like Instacart with their caper carts recently, and everyone knows about Amazon Just Walk Out, and I worked on the Trigo stuff at Tesco, so there's a huge amount of stuff there which is gathering more data in a store, and that really in the end gets you better availability. But it also gets into like the AI things we talked about earlier. How do you improve all that? Ultimately, we're just trying to make sure the customer can get what they want, right? But I think that is being quite disruptive, especially in places where they've never been particularly good at making sure they had their availability in the first place, right? And you can go into quite a few UK supermarkets now. I think I was in a Morrison's recently where they had the little focal cameras that point down at the shelves.
Yeah.
That's just more data, right? That helps with availability. So there's lots of examples of that around, and I think we'll see that continue. Smart carts and stuff as well, inevitably just feeds the data machine.
Okay, cool, brilliant. Listen, fantastic.